Welcome to Innovation Inside the Box. Drew Boyd teaches teams, businesses, and governments how to solve tough problems to create a culture of innovation and a flowing pipeline. Innovation Inside the Box features structured creativity and innovation strategies for leaders who want to think differently, be more innovative, implement change, and grow. The conversations you'll hear will help you apply innovation methods to services and processes, overcome resistance to ideas, and create a culture of innovation. Here's your host, Drew Boyd.
I gave you a challenge and you responded to that challenge. Welcome to Innovation Inside the Box. You know, a few episodes ago, I discussed one of the 5 techniques of the creativity method called systematic inventive thinking. In that particular episode, I discussed the multiplication technique, and I described in detail how it's been used to essentially create an entire industry of photography. You look at the cameras today, and you look at video, still cameras, phone cameras, any type of photography essentially can be described by the multiplication pattern. And so in that episode, I issued a challenge to all of you listeners to take the multiplication technique and see if you could apply it also to photography and to cameras to see if you could create something completely new to the world. Well, guess what? Some of you took that challenge and did a great job with it and sent me those ideas. And in this episode, I'm going to describe 3 of the ideas that came out of that challenge. First of all, let me recap for you this technique called multiplication. Multiplication works again you start by listing the components of the system, then you randomly pick a component, it can be anything, and then you imagine creating a copy or copies of it, doesn't have to be one copy, and then you change it in some counterintuitive way, some way regarding its function or its material or its location or some other way that just at first doesn't seem to make any sense. And then, of course, as you know, if you're a regular listener, you take that thing we call the virtual product, you work backwards to imagine if this were a solution and it's solving a problem, what benefit would it now deliver? SIT is a great technique, right? It's the only technique I found that can work repeatedly over and over in any situation. So let's get on to hear some of the challenges that were responded to, some of these ideas that came from you, the listeners. And this first one comes from one of our listeners, Bob Hanger, who lives in Williamsburg, Virginia. And what Bob did is imagine taking one of the traditional SLR cameras, single lens reflex cameras. And I say that because so many cameras are DSLR. And some of those have become what are called mirrorless cameras. But the SLR camera works by having a mirror and a prism system that permits the photographer to view the subject, but then the light comes in, bounces off this mirror and up into the area where the light is captured, either on film or digitally. And so what Bob did is imagine we took that mirror and you copy it, but in this case, 2 copies, and they are placed on either side facing in a different direction of the main lens, the main mirror. And so what that would give you then is what? Well, it's basically a side shooting camera. So you would take the main picture, and now you would get images from left and right, for example, of the photographer, and you'd be copying not just the image straight ahead, but on either side of you. Okay, so what would be the benefit? Well, now the trick is to imagine in what situations would that be just amazing? And I can think of lots. So, for example, if you have a camera that you're using to diagnose something inside the body, let's say you're using a camera to examine somebody's esophagus or their bowel or some other part, and you want to make sure that you see any pathology, any tumors or whatever polyps on either side of the main view, I think that would be incredibly useful. You can imagine security cameras. You can imagine other situations where a camera that now sees left and right as well as straight ahead could be quite useful. I think it's a great idea. Thanks, Bob. Now, in full disclosure, I should let you know that I actually know Bob. Bob is not just a regular listener of my podcast. He is also my dear friend and former roommate from the Air Force Academy. That's right, Bob and I, back in the day, were at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and we have known each other a long time. Bob is no stranger to innovation. He holds a master's degree in engineering from MIT, and he is the epitome of a rocket scientist and just a great guy. So, Bob, thanks for submitting that. Now, this next idea is also from a listener, but they did not identify themselves, but I get the idea. I understand the essence of it. And this idea was submitted with the idea of multiplying the main lens. And so now you have a camera that has not just one lens, but has multiple lenses. And I like that idea. What they also are describing is this idea of taking and copying it, but now not just pointing it in different directions, but having it in different locations. So in a way, it's a distributed lens that can see multiple things in different locations. It's a little bit like the multiplied mirror camera, which can see left and right. But now this idea would take the lens and put it in different places around a room, for example, all with the idea of taking the same shot. So imagine if you had cameras at let's say a venue, like a concert hall, and you place these different lenses and you took the shot, and the camera captures all of these shots together. Now, some of you know the idea of panorama, which stitches all these shots together to form one panoramic view. But why do they have to be all connected? Why couldn't they be distributed around and all be taking the same point in time, the same events, but just from different angles? I think it's a pretty clever idea, actually. And I haven't seen anything like that. Now, the idea of having multiple cameras in a venue is nothing new, like video cameras or security cameras. But this would be a still camera that you snap it and boom, you take multiple shots of different lenses of the same subject, but from different points of view. Pretty clever idea. Thanks for submitting that. And then the third idea that I wanted to suggest or to share with you that took the challenge, it's from one of our listeners named Haz Saeed. And Haz gave me this idea. He said, thanks for your podcast and all your hard work, Drew. Thanks, Saeed. I appreciate that. I'm glad to have you as a listener. So for the camera challenge, he thought about multiplying the shutter button. Okay, so the shutter button is that button on the camera or on your smartphone, the thing you push to take the picture. Pretty mundane part of the camera, right? And you wouldn't think that would be something you'd want to multiply. But here's what he did. He imagined multiplying it in an infinite way. I love that because that really is one of the common pitfalls of using multiplication is just making one copy. And what Saeed did is said, no, heck with that. We're going to make multiple infinite copies of this remote button. But then you essentially give that button to friends and to family, or you put it out on social media to your followers, or then maybe you give it for a fee to certain photographers. Imagine giving the shutter button, which is essentially giving control of that camera and where it's pointed at that point in time, so you could take the shot at that moment of whatever you see. So I'm imagining here's how it would work. So imagine you point this camera at a nature subject or a crowd of people or a concert venue, back to concerts, or a shopping mall, whatever it is that you want to take a picture of. Sunsets, visual scenes at an airport, you pick it. And what you essentially have now is viewers that are part of this system can see what's going on at that moment in time. And when they see the perfect shot in their mind, snap, they hit the button and voila, the shutter button takes the camera, takes the photo, and you've captured your view of what you think is important for what you're seeing at that point in time. And everybody else can do it on their terms. So imagine you give this shutter button to the greatest photographers in the world. Imagine if Ansel Adams was still alive, or Annie Leibovitz, or any of the great photographers out there that would have access to your camera and could take the shot that they think is just amazing. They capture the moment in their view, which is unique to them then, all given the same view of that particular camera. I think that also is a pretty clever idea, and just 3 examples of many that have come out of the multiplication pattern in photography over the years. Hey, and the 3 of you did that pretty fluidly and correctly. Congratulations to you. You took the challenge. And I encourage all of you, if you want to get in the game and really understand this method called SIT, the best way to do it is to practice, to do exactly what these three listeners did and to try to apply it to something right around you right now. Seriously, I want you to look around the room, randomly pick something, take a component of it randomly, imagine copying it, but changing it in some way, and then imagine a benefit for it. Hey, that's the essence of creativity. It's the sudden collision or juxtaposition of two previously unrelated things that give you a unique view and help you break fixedness so you can see new and creative opportunities anytime you want. And folks, it doesn't matter where you're starting from on the creativity scale. You don't have to be a rocket scientist like Bob Hanger. You can be just an everyday person who wants to be more creative. And that, my friends, is what Innovation Inside the Box is all about. Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and you're liking this particular episode, maybe you have a friend that's really into photography, go ahead and send them a link to this particular episode. I think they'd enjoy it. And who knows, maybe they'd want to subscribe. Maybe you'd want to subscribe. Go ahead and hit that button. You can access this podcast through all the traditional channels, Apple, Spotify, Google, and so on. And we'd love to have you join us to learn how to be creative in a systematic way.